Hello, everybody. My name is Micah Lee. I am an investigative journalism and the director of information security at the Intercept. I kind of accidentally turned into a journalist. I didn't mean to. In late 2012, while I was working at EFF as a technologist, I got an anonymous encrypted email from someone, and they asked if I could help some journalists learn how to use PGP email encryption. And so I did. And then I learned a few months later that the person that I was anonymously talking to was Edward Snowden, and I was working on helping him leak NSA documents to journalists. And so I've been doing investigative journalism for the Intercept ever since. I spent many years reporting on Snowden documents, and I helped publish over 2,000 documents. But since then, I've also analyzed and reported on many other leaked or hacked data sets. And now I've written a book to teach everyone else how to do it as well. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about is what's in this book. But before I start telling you about the book, let me give you a brief overview of some of just a few data sets from earlier this year that you probably haven't heard of that have been leaked online, just very quickly. So in January, the smartphones forensics companies Celebrate and MSAB were both hacked. Their source code was leaked online. And then also a police intelligence company called Odin Intelligence was hacked, and their data was leaked online. And then this was in March, the city of Oakland. Well, the city of Oakland was hit with ransomware, and their data was leaked online in March. And this data set, I've looked through a little bit of it, includes police disciplinary records for Oakland police and information about lawsuits against the city. In May, someone found a public Google Drive folder with 20 gigabytes of data from the anti-trans hate group, the American College of Pediatricians. This group is the group that played a big role in the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In August, 2 different stalkerware companies were hacked. Databases of their customers were dumped on the internet. These are companies that make Android spyware and sell it for cheap to people like domestic abusers so they can monitor their partner's text messages and browser history and everything else on their phones. One of these companies is from Brazil, one from Iran, but the targets of their hacks are all over the world. In August, someone hacked Russia's censorship office and dumped the source code for AI software that they use to scour the internet for stuff to block. In June, someone hacked and leaked 1 million emails from Donetsk, the Russian puppet government that Russia just stole from Ukraine. So that was just a tiny subset of just a few of the data sets that have recently been leaked online. They might contain newsworthy stuff. I've barely had a chance to look at any of those. But also, neither has anybody else. No one is looking at these data sets. And I think that a big reason is that journalists and researchers just really don't have the skills. And so I'm hoping to change that. So I spent the last 2 years writing a book about how to analyze hacked and leaked data sets. And here's actually the only copy that I have. It's not out yet. It'll be out soon. But if anybody wants to just grab it and look through it or whatever, you're welcome to. I just want it back. The book is really hands-on. It uses real data sets as examples, and it has you download them and use them and analyze them as you read the book. It's designed for total newbies, so it doesn't assume any prior technical experience or any technical skills at all. All you need is a laptop, an internet connection, about a terabyte of disk space, and you have to be willing to dive deep into the nerdy details. It's a cross-platform book. I made sure that even everything works from Windows and Mac OS and Linux, and so it uses a lot of Windows subsystem for Linux. And so briefly, here's what's in it. I start with talking about things like digital security and source protection and ethics and document redaction, and also where you can download some data sets. Then I move on to a deep dive into more technical topics like using the terminal and how to make data sets searchable, and working with email dumps in different formats. And then I go into like the very beginning basics of Python programming, and then I spend time on like especially how to work with structured data like CSV files, JSON files, and then I go into SQL databases, and at the end there's a few case studies. I'm also releasing the book under a Creative Commons license to remove any barriers to access. Once it's released in January, I'll put a PDF of it up on the website hacksandleaks.com, and the beginning of the book is up there now if you want. Okay, so before you start working with hacked and leaked data, it's important to start with a baseline of digital security. And so the first part of the book is the least technical, but it's still critically important. Some of the homework assignments include starting to use a password manager, making sure your hard disk is encrypted, and showing you how to encrypt a USB hard disk. And then also you can't trust everything that you read online, and this includes hacked and leaked data sets that you download or that some stranger sends you. And so it shows you some techniques on how you can verify that the data that you get is authentic before you write about it. The book also goes into how to acquire data sets, both public data sets that anyone can download, and also private data sets that you get directly from confidential sources, and also considerations on how to protect those sources and how to communicate with them and things like that. And all the data sets that you actually download and work with throughout it, you get from distributed denial of secrets. So distributed denial of secrets, or DDoS secrets, it's a US nonprofit that was founded in 2018. It's basically the public library of hacked and leaked data sets. There's like a lot more data sets than just what's on there, like a lot more, but they basically try to look for data sets and get submissions for data sets that they think might be newsworthy. And then they like hold on to them and help journalists access them. And I've been working with DDoS secrets for a few years. I report on data sets that they publish all the time. The website's ddossecrets.com. They also have a newsletter, ddossecrets.substack.com, and they post every time there's a new data set that they release. So if you want to get like an email when there's something new that you might be interested in, that's a good thing to subscribe to. And one of the first homework assignments is to download a copy of the BlueLeaks data set from DDoS secrets to your encrypted disk. In the summer of 2020, in the middle of the Black Lives Matter uprising that was sparked after cops murdered George Floyd, someone hacked hundreds of law enforcement websites, most of them belonging to law enforcement fusion centers, and leaked 270 gigabytes of data to DDoS secrets. So this is the BlueLeaks data set. This is the data set that I work with most throughout the book. And it's large and complicated, but it's great for practice. And also another thing about this data set is I think that there's still only a small amount of it that's really been like looked through. I think that there's still a lot of revelations in there that just haven't been published because nobody's really looked yet. So not everyone was as happy about BlueLeaks as I was. After DDoS Secrets was published, German authorities, at the request of the FBI, seized a DDoS Secrets server that had all of their public data sets. It didn't actually do anything to suppress BlueLeaks journalism, though, because they used BitTorrent as well. And then also in 2020, both Reddit and Twitter started censoring DDoS Secrets. Twitter suspended the DDoS Secrets account and then also started preventing anyone from posting links to ddossecrets.com or from even DMing links or anything like that. I briefly had hope that when Elon Musk took over Twitter, he might restore the DDoS Secrets account and stop censoring the links, but that didn't happen. And then in 2020, like shortly after Twitter started censoring DDoS Secrets, they also used the same link blocking thing to censor a link to a New York Post article that was based on stolen documents from Hunter Biden's laptop. And Republicans were so pissed about this that they had like congressional hearings, and they were very angry. Twitter reversed the censorship of the New York Post after 2 days, but DDoS Secrets has still been blocked for over 3 years. And while I'm talking about DDoS Secrets getting censored, in February, DDoS Secrets published data from Roskomnadzor, which is the Russian government agency in charge of monitoring and controlling and censoring mass media. And this is actually the second leak from Roskomnadzor that they've published. I think they've published 3 of them from this same agency now. And the first one was right after Russia invaded Ukraine, when there was dozens and dozens of different data sets. People, like hacktivists, were just going wild and hacking Russian government companies and government agencies and companies, and there was many, many terabytes of data. So yeah, but in the second leak, DDoS secrets is actually mentioned. This is a court document that is an attachment in an email on that data set that is actually, it shows a request to add DDoSsecrets.com to Russia's domain name censorship list. Oh, an interesting thing about this is completely not really related to this, but ChatGPT, the GPT-4 version, supports uploading images. I uploaded a screenshot of this and asked it to describe it, what it says in English, and it actually did a really good job. It's like, oh, well, the agency, and it shows the Cyrillic, and then it says the English, and it explains what the accusations are. So that was kind of interesting. Okay, so the technical part of the books, it starts with teaching how to use the command line. It teaches the basic things like navigating the file system and running commands and using sudo. And then it moves on to some techniques that are useful for quickly analyzing data sets. So for example, when you first download BlueLeaks, it's a folder of 167 zip files. And you could right-click on each zip file and unzip them one at a time, but that is slow and cumbersome, and so it shows you how to do it all at once with a for loop. After you unzip them, you have hundreds of folders, many of them full of thousands and thousands of files, and so you learn how to use commands like du to measure the disk space of different folders and do that in a for loop too, and how to use commands like sort to sort the output so you can see, these are the smallest folders, these are the largest folders, maybe these are the ones with the more interesting stuff to start looking at. It shows you how to use find to make lists of file names, how to use grep to search those lists of file names, or to quickly search for strings and other text files and things like that. So grep is a great tool for searching in lists of file names, and it's also great for searching the content of some files, some plain text files like CSVs and JSON files, but you can't use it to search most types of data, including PDFs and Office documents, and even emails. Emails are plain text files, but because of MIME encoding, a lot of email is base64 encoded, so you just won't be able to search it with grep. So if you want to search the contents of all of these, you can use software called Aleph. Aleph, it's open source investigation software developed by OCCRP, which is the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. They built this for investigative journalism, and OCCRP runs a big public Aleph server that anyone can go to at aleph.occrp.org. And you can use this to index data sets and then search them. And it has a lot of other cool features too, like entity extraction and OCR and being able to cross-reference things in multiple data sets. It's also possible to run an Aleph server locally on your laptop using Docker, and that's one of the homework assignments. So here's a screenshot from the book of using Aleph, and in this case I indexed just a little piece of the BlueLeaks data from IceFishX, which is a partnership between law enforcement agencies in Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And this was, when was this from? This was June 2020. This was just a few days after George Floyd was murdered. This is an unclassified law enforcement sensitive document. And it warns of increased threats against police by protesters. Okay, so email dumps are also a very common form of leaked data set. So there's a whole chapter on how to read other people's email. And this goes over the email message format, how email protocols work a little bit, but mostly it focuses on the different file formats the email dumps come in, which are EML files, which is a bunch of individual emails, mbox files, and PST Outlook files. Oops. So it kind of shows you how to convert the email dumps to the right format and then import them in Thunderbird using an add-on called import-export tools. And then once they're in Thunderbird, you could read them kind of as if you have access to the inbox. And you can use Thunderbird search tools and things like that. And so for example, here's a screenshot from the Nauru police force data set. Nauru is a tiny island in the Pacific that hosts abuse-ridden offshore detention centers that the Australian government uses to hold immigrants and asylum seekers. So this screenshot shows an email from the president of Nauru at the time, telling Nauru's police chief to not respond to a journalist who asked questions about 2 Nauru men who had allegedly attacked a refugee worker and possibly ran him over with a car and stole his motorbike. It's interesting. You could actually filter this set for all the emails from the president of the country, and you could read them. And there's a few other tools you can use for email dumps. Aleph is one of them, but also for PST files. These are Outlook files. You can use Outlook itself and import PST files into Outlook, or just open PST files in Outlook. And so this is a screenshot of Outlook where I imported a 48 gigabyte PST file that was leaked from the largest state-owned media company in Russia, VGTRK. This was another one of the organizations that was hacked right after Russia invaded Ukraine. I had searched for the Cyrillic spelling of Tucker Carlson. And so this says Tucker Carlson sync. And then this email is probably for subtitles or for dubbing, like showing a Tucker Carlson segment on Russian TV. And it's basically Tucker Carlson saying that Ukraine isn't an independent country, but rather it's controlled by the Democratic Party in the US. And then there's conspiracy theories about Hunter Biden. Okay, so tools like Aleph and Thunderbird only work for some data sets, but for a lot of data sets, you really have to write custom code to make any sense of them. And so the book includes a crash course on Python programming for beginners, and it focuses on traversing the file system and working with data and dictionaries and lists a bunch. And so here's a quick example of that. So on the day that Russia invaded Ukraine, the ransomware group Conti published this statement. Conti is a ransomware gang. They're known for extorting hundreds of millions of dollars from companies, especially healthcare companies around the world. And a few days after they published this statement, a Ukrainian security researcher probably hacked Conti, dumped 30 gigs of internal documents online, including chat logs. And so the chat logs were from a Rocket Chat server that they hosted themselves in an Onion service, and they were in JSON format. And so here's an example of a single message posted in Conti's chat room on the day of the invasion. This message translates to, some American senators suggest blocking Pornhub in Russia in addition to social networks. And this was right when the US and Europe started doing economic sanctions against Russia, and then Russia started blocked access to Twitter and Facebook, and there were all these rumors that Pornhub would block access to Russian users, which never actually happened. But the next messages in the chat were, that's it, we're done. They will take away our last joys. And so here's some code from that chapter that shows you how to work with this data. So the clip at the top loads this JSON file and parses it, and then there's just a simple for loop, and then it shows how to like actually make sense of this convoluted structure that this data happens to come in, and then it shows you how to a for loop to display it in such a way that is possible to like copy and paste into a translation app. And so here's the reporting for the Intercept that I did on the Conti chat logs. And so that's the big part of the book, is it teaches you how to take like incomprehensible data like this and make it possible for you to read it and to understand it and to report on it. So another common format is the data leaks common is spreadsheets, and particularly CSV files. So I have a whole chapter on that, and there's a lot of CSV files in BlueLeaks, so I'll show you a little bit of that. So here's a quick example of something that I found in a CSV. I grepped the contents of CSV files in the NCRIC folder in BlueLeaks for the word Antifa. So NCRIC is the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center, which is actually my local fusion center that I didn't even know existed until BlueLeaks happened, and I started looking around, and I was like, what is this organization? it found, so this file is sars.csv, which lists suspicious activity reports, which are basically rumors or leads posted to fusion centers about things that may or may not be illegal, basically. So here are the relevant fields from that CSV in a format that's easier to read. A lot of the homework of working with the CSV chapters involved like looping through a row at a time and making them easier to read, or like searching them for things, because there's just so much data in a lot of these. They have like hundreds of columns. So this shows that someone from the Marin County DA's office, which is just north of San Francisco, submitted this suspicious activity report on June 5th, 2020 at 2:20 p.m. They set the category to radicalization/extremism. And the summary says that they received the attached letter from a lawyer who was contacted by a University of Oregon student. And the student, quote, appears to be a member of the Antifa group and is assisting in planning protesting efforts in the Bay Area despite living in Oregon. And it also makes a reference to a file called letter.pdf. So here is the letter that it's referencing. It's from the lawyer. It's written in all caps. Please see the attached solicitation I received from an Antifa terrorist wanting my help to bail her and her friends out of jail if arrested for rioting. And he says he's staying anonymous because he's worried about getting bar complaints filed against him. And he ends the letter with happy hunting. And then the PDF goes on to show the original letter from the Oregon student. So it's very polite. She says she's compiling a list of lawyers and firms that would be willing to represent Black Lives Matter activists pro bono if they got arrested. So this letter triggered this unhinged lawyer so much that he mailed it to a district attorney's office, who then uploaded it as a suspicious activity report into the Northern California Police Intelligence Agency. So I never would have found this without first finding the CSV that points to it and like understand how it all worked and how all this happened. So back in 2020, when I was investigating Blue Leaks, I discovered that most of the information that's really interesting is in the CSV files. Yeah, the hacker had originally exported all of these CSV files from a SQL database. And so I realized that they were all related. There were columns that were like, you know, like one thing has an ID of another table. And so I made a custom web application called Blue Leaks Explorer that makes it way easier to look at Blue Leaks data. And so this is actually a row from a CSV. The email builder CSV is the bulk emails that the fusion centers send out. So in the case of NICRIC, they send, they have a list of about 16,000, I think, local cops across Northern California, and they send emails to all of them frequently, including like right during the Black Lives Matter protests. They would send 2 emails a day, one in the morning, one in like the late afternoon, listing all the local protests happening. And so, yeah, if you have a copy of Blue Leaks yourself, you could use Blue Leaks Explorer and it'll make your job way easier. And so, yeah, this one is an advertisement for a class for how cops can investigate stuff on cell phones. Okay, so another very common format that leaked data comes in is JSON. I spent a chapter going deep into JSON, and the examples I use are related to the January 6th insurrection. So on January 6th, 2021, anti-democracy activists stormed the US Capitol in Washington, D.C. to try to keep Trump in power after he lost the election. Using their phones, they took photos and videos, and a lot of times these included GPS coordinates in the metadata, and they posted them online in real time, and many of them posted them to Parler, which is a far-right social network. After the attack, Parler refused to moderate content that incited violence, and so Apple and Google kicked them off of their app stores, and AWS announced that it was going to kick Parler off its service as well in a few days. But before that happened, an archivist named Donk Enby downloaded 32 terabytes of videos from Parler, over 1 million videos. And that's like a lot of data. And the ironic thing is that she just copied it from like one S3 bucket into another S3 bucket, so it's still on Amazon even after they got kicked off. Yeah, 32 terabytes is like massive. The hard drive on this laptop is 1 terabyte, so it'd be 32 of these hard drives. And then she worked with DDoS Secrets to make all of the Parler videos public. But 32 terabytes is way too much data for people to individually download all of it. And so she used this command line program called exif tool, which is an excellent tool that you can use to extract metadata from files. It supports video files, but also Office documents and PDFs and things. So she used exif tool to extract metadata from every video, every of these like over 1 million videos, and save them in JSON files. And so part of the Parler data set is this metadata file. You could just download this a few hundred megabyte zip file and unzip it, and then you have 1 million JSON files. They're tiny JSON files, but overall it's 2 gigabytes of data. And so here's example metadata of one of the videos. And as you can see, it was created on January 6, 2021. It includes GPS coordinates in Washington, DC. And so here's an example of a type of Python script that you'd write if you followed along with the book. And so this is a script that loops through all 1 million pieces of video metadata from Parler, looking for videos that were filmed on January 6th and that have GPS coordinates in Washington, DC. And then when it finds these videos, it saves this data into a format that can be loaded into Google Earth to visualize. And if you've never written code before, it like walks you through the entire process of programming from the beginning. And so it should be doable, and you should have enough programming skills to write relatively simple scripts like this. And so here is a Google Earth map of that data. And as you can see, Trump supporters were deep inside the Capitol building. And so many of these videos in this data set were used as evidence in Trump's second impeachment inquiry. Another common format that leaked and hacked data sets come in is SQL databases. And so I have a chapter all about SQL, and as an example, I use data from a hosting company called Epic. Epic is a company that's run by a Christian nationalist, and it provides domain registration and hosting services to hate groups and to other far-right extremists. And it's actually really known for when a mass shooter posts a manifesto, and then the website they post it to gets taken down, like 8chan, they like move over to Epic because Epic will protect their domain names. So, for example, Epic hosts the domain name oathkeepers.org, and if you look up who is data for oathkeepers.org, you'll see that it's behind Epic's domain privacy service. But the SQL databases in this data breach include the actual registration information for everyone behind their privacy service. So if you run a SQL query in the Epic data, you can find the real contact information behind the person who owns the domain. And so in this case, it's or the person who registered the domain. I think there's admin. The registrant is Stuart Rhodes, but the admin is Edward Durfee, who lives in New Jersey and who runs a company called EGM Systems. And I was like wondering who this Edward Durfee guy is. And if you look at the separate leak of Oathkeeper's email, you can see that Edward Durfee is the Oathkeeper's IT support person. He like responds to IT support emails. So the Epic data has domain name registration information for a lot of other websites, including sites that are run by neo-Nazis. And it also has information about Jim Watkins, who used to run 8chan and now runs 8kun and is probably the person behind QAnon. So finally, I describe some detailed case studies at the end of the book. I won't go into a lot of detail, but briefly, here's one of them. In September 2021, I was contacted by an anonymous source who said that they were dropping some docs on Cadence Health, the horse paste peddlers, and that they were hilariously easy to hack. At the time, I had no idea what Cadence Health was or who anyone involved in this story was. I just had these 2 files that are relatively small. They're like 100 megabytes together. A few weeks later, I published my story. I had found out that an anti-vax group called America's Frontline Doctors was making millions and millions of dollars convincing people that vaccines are harmful and then selling them fake COVID medicine instead ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And I basically discovered that over a 2-month period, they charged people at least $6.7 million just for $90 phone appointments. And I only have 2 months of data, but if you assume if they're making the same amount of money on average during the whole time that they were operating, then it would have they probably more closely charged people an additional $18 million on top of that just for doctor appointments. And then for the fake medicine, that patient spent another $8.7 million on that. So it's like a lot of money. This was, they made a lot of money with us. So this reporting ultimately led to a congressional investigation into America's frontline doctors and also the scammy telehealth companies that work with them. But all of the groups basically stonewalled the committee, the congressional committee, and refused to cooperate, and then the Republicans took the House and shut down the committee, so nothing really happened. And then also, so Simone Gold is the founder of America's Frontline Doctors. She's also a January 6th insurrectionist. While she was serving 2 months in prison for that, other people at this group tried to conduct a little coup of their own. America's Frontline Doctors lawyer, Joey Gilbert, audited how she had been spending her money, and then he sued her to try to take control of the organization. There's like so much hilarious drama with this group, actually. It's pretty interesting. But in addition to like all of this money that they had scammed out of people, they had at least $10 million in donations because they're a nonprofit and some of this information is public. So while more than 1 million Americans were dying from COVID during the pandemic, according to this lawsuit, this is how Simone Gold was spending America's Frontline Doctors charity money. She lived rent-free in a $3.6 million mansion in Naples, Florida, purchased with America's Frontline Doctors money. She spent $12,000 a month on a bodyguard, $5,600 a month on a housekeeper, $50,000 a month on credit card bills. She had purchased 3 cars, including a Mercedes-Benz. She took private jet flights, including a single trip that cost $100,000. But this, just like on January 6th, this coup failed, and she got out of prison and basically regained control of the group. And it's still active. They no longer sell ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine anymore. They've kind of Simone Gold has started a new separate company that is not under investigation that's doing that now. Yeah. Oh, and I recently gave a detailed talk about this case study at DEF CON at the Misinformation Village, and it goes into way more detail if you're interested, or you could read the book. And so then another case study involved neo-Nazi chat logs that was collected by anti-fascist infiltrators in 2017. So in August 2017, hundreds of white supremacists spent a weekend in Charlottesville, Virginia for the Unite the Right rally. The protesters came from groups like Vanguard America, Identity Europa, League of the South, and the Ku Klux Klan. One neo-Nazi drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing Heather Heyer and injuring 19 other people. And this is when Trump, in response to the violence, famously said that there were very fine people on both sides. So a nonprofit news collective called Unicorn Riot got chat logs from Discord servers that the fascists had used to organize the violence in Charlottesville, and they also obtained chat logs from a lot of other Discord servers, like dozens of them, from the American far right. They were all infiltrated by anti-fascists, and at this time, the fascists were really using Discord. They loved it. And so journalists at Unicorn Riot sent me copies of the chat logs in JSON format, and I was starting to look into it, and I wanted to report on it, so I built this custom web app just so that I could make sense of the chat logs and read through them and then write an article about them. Here's the article that I ended up writing. I was going to keep reporting on these chat logs, but I kind of found sitting there reading the inner thoughts of terrible people to be really upsetting, and I didn't really want to do that, and so instead I just decided to spend my time just improving this app so other people could be reading all of these. And this part of the book actually includes a section on mental health when you're doing extremism research, because it could be pretty terrible. So I shared the code with Unicorn Riot, and then they eventually took over development and turned it into this public website called Discord Leaks. And today it has hundreds and thousands of messages from dozens of different fascist chat rooms, and it's an important tool used by extremism researchers. Survivors from Charlottesville sued the organizers of the Unite the Right, hoping to bankrupt the American fascist movement, and they kind of succeeded. The lawyers used Discord leaks to gather evidence for their initial complaint. So the Unite the Right organizers and also fascist groups like the Ku Klux Klan and Identity Europa were ordered to pay $25 million in damages. And the lawyers said, well, our team eventually subpoenaed the full servers from Discord itself. These initial leaks provided crucial early information that made the speed and breadth of the initial complaint possible. And yeah, the chat logs from the Charlottesville server were like explicitly included people talking about running over counter-protesters and then claiming self-defense, which is exactly what happened. And so on that happy note, does anybody have any questions? I don't know, I guess I went through this pretty fast. I also, No Starch Press has a BSides discount if you wanted to pre-order it. Yeah, any questions? Should I? Oh, there's a microphone.
Yeah, can you apply some of these same techniques to analyzing Freedom of Information Act information?
Yes, so the techniques, it works with any type of data. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about protecting sources and how to download stuff, but yeah, if you get a bunch of documents from FOIA, you can absolutely index them in Aleph and search them, or if you get a lot of emails, you can import them into Thunderbird. So yeah, it's it doesn't matter the source of the data. You can use these techniques for anything.
So I'm curious if you know if in any of these fancy new machine learning techniques and all of that has been used with Aleph or any extensions or anything to load in a bunch of text and ask hey, what's the craziest thing in here, and then see what the robots what the robots think of that.
That's a good question. This book doesn't include any of that, but I have experimented with some of it. I mean, the biggest problem really is the easiest way to do this is using OpenAI's APIs, using GPT-4. But the problem is you have to share data with OpenAI. And so that's okay with some data sets that are public, but it's not okay with a lot of data sets. I don't want to be sitting there sending everyone's PII to OpenAI that's going to be used to train GPT-5 next. But I did actually start writing this thing that was an app that lets you ask natural language questions about a SQL database, and it'll just run SQL queries for you, get the responses, and then give you natural language answers, which was actually pretty cool. It seemed to work well. I used a leak of the Texas GOP website, actually. It was a WordPress site, and it was what type of articles are on this blog? And it would run some queries, and then it would describe the types of articles on the blog. It was cool.
So what is your either findings or advice for people, journalists or researchers who want to do this? Because we're talking here about terabytes, and when you put it all together, petabytes worth of data. And you're right, it doesn't fit on your laptop. Is there anything open to journalists for where you can do large data set analysis, be it AWS or Google or somewhere else, or have those data sets out there in the raw that you can then do your analysis on without having to do the download and invest in your own local file storage infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. What is it? I forget what it's called. Google actually now has a journalism product where if you have data in Google Drive, they basically have a competitor to Aleph. So if you do get a huge data set and have it in Google Drive, you can start indexing it in this Google tool, and then it makes it does a similar thing where it looks through each document and OCRs it, and you can search the whole data set. I haven't spent a lot of time on it, but it looks promising. But that's also will only work with data sets that are already kind of public that you're okay with putting on Google. And then, really, I think that it's a hard problem. I think that for smaller data sets, individual journalists can download them and then index them on Aleph on their own computer, or spin up a Postgres database and import a SQL database and then start running queries locally. That's pretty easy. But otherwise, I think that the best bet is to trying, so OCCRP runs a big public Aleph server with lots of data sets. You can contact them and get them to index something that you're interested in, and then get a private account on it. And that's one way of doing it. But also, if you're a journalist and you work for a newsroom, you get your newsroom to set up an Aleph and have their tech people run it.
Did anyone track down that lawyer from the Blue Leaks and get them disbarred?
No one tracked down that lawyer. I didn't spend very much time tracking down the lawyer, but I didn't know who they were because in the suspicious activity report, what was uploaded was basically this letter where they didn't have their contact information or their name, and a scan of the envelope that they had sent, and they didn't put a return address. I think that I don't know why they sent it to the Marin DA, because I think that they were actually in the South Bay, which is a different part of the Bay Area. But no, I don't actually know who it is. It would be interesting to track down that lawyer.
Could you use an LLM like Llama or something to run those requests that you run on ChatGPT locally?
Yeah. You totally. I haven't spent too much time on this, but yeah, there's what is the software called? I think it's Local LLM.
Yeah, there's a bunch that do those.
There's a bunch of them. So yeah, you could totally do that stuff. I think that the big thing is that it takes a GPU, a bunch of engineering work to get it set up, and it's not as good as what you can pay for. It's it'll be more expensive and not as good as if you're just paying OpenAI. But yeah, also, I don't know, I also think that there's limited value. I think that you can potentially get some really useful stuff, but I think that you can't just run it through the LLM and be oh, nothing here. I think you need to spend a lot of time on it and figure out exactly what you want to do, and then maybe write some software that uses the GPT-4 API or something like that to do specific tasks, more than just having it do its thing for you. Potentially I could see maybe taking every single document, splitting it into PNGs, uploading each PNG, getting GPT-4 to summarize them all, and then summarize it together and do all this stuff. But that's a lot of work, and I don't even know if it'll yield to anything.
On was it Blue Leaks that was the source of most of the stuff about
the law enforcement
the
stuff?
Black Lives Matter, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that would be less. But did that reveal? What did that reveal about sort of ongoing risk to protesters or other targeting things? Were there any other especially egregious things that they were?
Especially egregious things in Blue Leaks?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I basically only looked at NCREC, the Northern California one. And actually before this, I was trying to see what the Oregon Fusion Center is, and if it was in Blue Lakes. And I saw on the DHS website that there's an Oregon Fusion Center. I didn't find it in Blue Lakes. There is actually an Oregon. Oh, it is. What folder is it? Yeah. There's a Retail Alliance one. So there's ORCAs, which are organized retail crime associations, which are sort of like fusion centers, except they're geared towards retail crime. And so all of the people who have accounts are work for Walmart and Target and stuff like that. And it's they share intelligence across big geographical areas with police about retail crime. So there's that, but there's not the one that's more about law enforcement and anti-terrorism. But anyway, to answer your question, I mostly looked at NCREC. There's some other reporting from some other fusion centers that, in Austin, Texas, in Maine, those fusion centers, I think there was a lot of reporting from them. There's a lot in Blue Lakes that no one's looked at. I found I don't know. I mean, I'm very unimpressed by the fusion centers. Like, basically, the ultimate thing that they do is they have a mailing list where they just distribute information to like local cops. That's the whole idea. Is it's like a way of information sharing between federal agencies and local agencies. And so the FBI will like send a bulletin to NCRIC. Bulletin will forward this along to their 16,000 or whatever local cops. And that's basically it. It's like a mailing list. Like, there's some more, like NCRIC also offers services like breaking into locked phones. So if you're in Northern California, you arrest someone and you get their phone, but you don't know the password, you can go to NCRIC and they'll like help you break into the phone. So there's a few things like that, and you can actually see like the list of requests that have been made to break into phones and to do other things like that. Or they also offer like social media, like I think social media exploitation is what they called it, services to like, look up people online and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I noticed that like the FBI and the DHS would send these bulletins to NCRIC that were kind of like, sometimes they have like already debunked hoaxes, and then like, but they thought that it was, the analyst that was sending this thought that it was real and fell for it, and then they would send this to all of the cops. So there was like a thing about like George Soros paying professional anarchists, and like that was an example of one where like that was distributed to thousands and thousands of cops across Northern California, and I think probably across the United States, even though like I was looking at like the date that they sent that email, and like there was a Snopes article from a week earlier like explaining why it wasn't real. So yeah.
Hi, I've started reading the book. It's really great. Thank you for writing it. And I know that you mentioned that, the motivation behind it is that there's a tons of data that, not many people are looking at, maybe, lack of resources, et cetera. How do you prioritize the nuggets of stories? I know, this is more about how to tease the story out of the data. How do you prioritize, the tons and tons of things that you come across?
I mean, that's really hard because I have to just ignore all of it. I mean, really, it's like, it depends on how busy I am when I hear about a data set. And then if I think that there could be something juicy in there, I don't know, there isn't a good way. It's very subjective. And I end up, there's like all of this data, and if I'm not too busy, I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. I'm gonna see if I could like take some time to look at that. And if it looks like really interesting to the point where it's like, okay, I think that if I keep going, I could like actually pull out a really good story, then I keep going on it. But sometimes I just take cursory looks of data sets, and that's it, and then I move on. But yeah, I mean, I think that really it's about what I'm interested in covering. And like, so I'm sure there's lots of data sets that just are not really in my area of stuff that I write about or whatever, but that would like be really big for certain communities that I just don't look at. So I think that the more people that have these skills, the better, because then they can write about, what they're interested in. Especially like with Blue Leaks, there's stuff all across the United States, and basically everyone's just writing about their local stuff. And so if there isn't anyone local in like New York that's doing this, or in Portland that's doing this, then there's going to be no journalism from New York or Portland or whatever.
I was wondering, like in the beginning of this, you mentioned a bunch of different data sets that are really recent that people haven't really been looking at. How do you find out when these data sets come out? Like, is there just searches you do, or?
So all of those data sets were all from distributed denial of secrets. And all of the screenshots at the beginning, those were all actually just from their like newsletter. So that's one really easy way is ddossecrets.substack.com. You can go there and you can like look at the post history, and every time they release a new thing, they write a post about it. This is not at all everything. This is only a small amount that they hear about or that people submit to them and that they like decide is worth holding on to and releasing and helping journalists with. So there's a lot more, but yeah, I think that's probably the best way is to just look at DDoS secrets and see what they're releasing.
I know you have some affiliations with the Tor Project, and I was really influenced by Jacob Applebaum in the early years. Do you know if he's ever going to make a comeback?
I hope not.
All right, it looks like that's it.
Awesome, thank you.